Bastet is the oldest and one of the best-known Egyptian feline goddesses. Her countless cat images are today one of the symbols of pharaonic Egypt. In the times of the great pyramid builders, she was worshipped as the most important solar goddess, the mother of the sun, the mother of the pharaohs, a cosmic guardian maintaining creation, bringing the floods of the Nile, the lady of the northern hemisphere of the sky. Worshipped especially in the Nile Delta, Bastet, together with her southern counterpart Hathor, were a symbol of the two lands, the empire of the Old Kingdom. She was then imagined as a divine lioness, the solar eye of the Creator, although generous and gracious, yet terrifyingly dangerous. She had to be constantly tamed and calmed down. The mythological stories of her escape from Egypt were among the most popular. Her return was a reason for celebration by millions of believers. It seems that Bastet had abandoned her people for 1,000 years, but with the fall of the New Kingdom, her cult saw a renaissance. It was then that this fearsome goddess received a new, gentle face of a cat. Bastet of the late period and the Greco-Roman times became the patroness of motherhood and children, love and happiness. This sensual creature also personified female sexuality, and her cult was characterized by orgiastic rituals, festivals of lust and drunkenness. Hello everyone, my name's Irena. Welcome to my channel Ancient Side Girl. I invite you to a podcast about the history of ancient Egypt. Today I'll try to introduce you to the figure of the cat goddess, which isn't an easy task, because the nature of the cult of Bastet changed significantly over the millennia, so we will learn about the two faces of the goddess. Of course, we will use the original ancient texts. The lion-headed Bastet was the oldest feline goddess of Egypt, worshipped in the north probably already in pre-dynastic times, although the oldest evidence of her cult has been found on early dynastic vessel inscriptions. They were discovered in the underground gallery tombs in Saqqara, belonging to the first rulers of the Second Dynasty, reigning somewhere between the 29th to 27th century BC. Although the most important, Bastet surely wasn't the only lion goddess of Egypt. The presence of lions in the Nile Valley wasn't unusual in those times. The Egyptians noticed their increased activity in the cultivation areas in July, the hottest period, immediately preceding the annual floods of the Nile, at a time of greatest water shortage. Lions using natural paths such as wadis, dry riverbeds, searching for water and prey, entered the pastures from the desert areas, spreading terror among cattle breeders. Particularly troublesome to the Egyptians were the most active lionesses. At the same time, with their strength and aggressiveness, they represented divine majesty, and the determination with which they protected their young was to symbolize the kingship. Very early on, lion goddesses became the embodiment of the aggressive and feminine aspect of the sun, the punishing hand of the Creator. But lionesses approaching Egyptian homes also heralded the flooding of the Nile, the return of greenery and new life. We know that the cult of Bastet was born in the Nile Delta, however it's not certain where exactly. The city of Bubastis, with its famous sanctuary in pre-dynastic times, wasn't yet the capital of the nome, but was administratively subordinate to the city of Iunu, Heliopolis, the great center of the cult of Atum-Ra. So it's no wonder that from the very beginning the theology of Bubastis was shaped not independently but within the framework of the solar cult. Together with the priesthood of Heliopolis, Bubastis strove for a greater concentration of political power in the hands of the pharaoh. As we know, already at the beginning of the Old Kingdom, the solar cult enjoyed great interest among the rulers, and its importance was constantly increasing. The growth of Bastet's popularity was part of this process. At the beginning of the 4th dynasty, from the time of Snefru's reign, we can observe a close relationship between the king and Bastet, including her in the theological program of the royal family, whose members started to perform the functions of her priests. Titles of priests and invocations dedicated to Bastet from these times were found throughout Egypt. Bastet undoubtedly became a national deity in the time of the Great Pyramids. Her names and images adorn the monumental architecture of Giza. The magnificent granite-faced walls of the Khafre Valley Temple, the real gate to his gigantic funerary complex, are decorated only with 2 inscriptions. On the doorframe of the southern gate we read, Khafre, beloved of Hathor. On the other, northern gate we find Khafre, beloved of Bastet, giving life. Bastet and Hathor were probably referred to in all the valley temples of Giza. Hathor appears as the patroness of Upper Egypt, as the incarnation of the southern hemisphere of the sky, with her sanctuary in distant Dendera. Bastet, worshipped in the Delta, represents Lower Egypt, a northern and aggressive counterpart of Hathor. The functions of these 2 goddesses overlap in many aspects. They are complementary. Both goddesses are the mothers of the king. They are the ones who give birth to and breastfeed the pharaoh. Hathor as a heavenly cow, Bastet as a lioness. Bastet as the mother of the king takes the title Shesmatet, and as the punishing force, the aggressive aspect of the sun god and his eye, is titled Sekhmet, which means powerful. They are both aspects of the great Bastet. In the 24th century BC pyramid text of Unas we read, Unas has emerged from the Ennead's thighs. Unas has been conceived by Sekhmet, and Shesmatet is the one who gave birth to Unas, a star with sharp front and extensive goings, who fetches what the above has for the sun every day. Unas has come to his seat with the 2 ladies on it, appearing as a star. The southern counterpart of Bastet, Hathor, quickly came to be identified with these lion-headed goddesses. Both Hathoric and lion elements became omnipresent in Old Kingdom Egypt, and both sun goddesses were its heavenly patronesses. At the same time, the earthly patronesses of the state and mothers of the king were believed to be the vulture, Nekhbet, and the cobra, Wadjet. So Bastet of the Old Kingdom is a powerful goddess who is the mother of the king, which in the times of the 4th dynasty meant that she's the mother of the sun itself and its protector. By drinking her milk, the pharaoh achieves divine status, obtains Ankh and Was, life and domination, also over the cosmos as Atum-Ra himself. Bastet is a cosmic goddess who promotes the regeneration of the universe and ensures renewal and prosperity for Egypt, in particular takes care of the cyclical flooding of the Nile. Her role changes as the theology of kingship evolves. From the time of Khafre, pharaohs are called sons of the sun. Bastet like Hathor, becomes the spouse of Ra, and as his eye, also a daughter. She's positioned in this role by the new religion of Osiris, which appears during the 5th dynasty. The fall of the Old Kingdom in the 22nd century BC saw a weakening of the solar cult and a weakening of Bastet's position as a national deity. Still worshipped in the Nile Delta, she was identified with other goddesses who played a similar role. Besides Hathor of Dendera and Wadjet of Buto, these were Tefnut of Heliopolis, Mehit of Thinis, Isis of Philae, Mut of Thebes, and Pakhet of Speos Artemidos. As the daughter of the sun, Bastet is the heroine of one of the most popular myths of Egypt in general, known as the myth of the solar eye, also known as the myth of the wandering goddess or the returning goddess. Known today from many versions given by different, mainly late and Ptolemaic sources, it describes the fate of the gods after Zeb-Tepi, after the first time, and focuses on the difficult relationship of the creator, Atum-Ra, with his beloved daughter. Depending on the source, the daughter of the sun in the myth is Tefnut, Hathor, Bastet, Mut, or Ra-Tawi. The latter is the female form of Ra, once worshipped in Thebes. Her name can be read as Son of the Two Lands, as the ancient Egyptian word Tawi means pharaonic state. Other versions of the myth mention the female form of Horus, Horit, as well as the lioness Sekhmet, clearly associated with the destructive aspect of the Eye of Ra, or her Nubian counterpart, Menhit, and sometimes even Isis herself. As you can see, the heroine of the myth could have been any solar goddess, including those lesser, local daughters of the sun. According to the myth, Ra was pleased with his work of creation, and most of all with his daughter, who personified Ma'at, truth and divine law, that maintained divine creation in order and balance, and also was the solar eye, the mysterious, powerful tool of the creator, an extension of his divine power. It was thanks to her, the original female principle, that everything went as it should, each thing was in its place. One day, however, for some unknown reason, this beloved daughter was offended at her father and left the kingdom, going to a distant land. The most complete records of the myth come from the so-called mythological manuals, written in the late period and copied in the Greco-Roman times. They contain ancient stories about the gods of Egypt set in local reality specific to a given region. Stories of the goddess, the daughter of Ra, leaving Egypt and eventually returning, were originally intended to explain natural phenomena such as the recurring floods of the Nile, the waning of the moon, or the heliacal rising of Sirius. The absence of the goddess personifying Ma'at is the collapse of all natural laws. We learn that day turned into night, hours and seasons were mixed up, and the Nile stopped flooding or even flowed against the current. The departure of the first female being also caused the collapse of sexual life. The world was threatened with infertility, barrenness, and destruction. The mythological manual of the Delta from the 26th Said dynasty compares the goddess's journey to the heliacal rising of Sirius. She becomes female Horus, Horit, and the cycles of the Nile floods are somehow connected with her menstrual cycle. We read, quote, "Concerning Bastet, who is in Bubastis, this is the efflux when she came forth as Horit on the eastern mountain of Heliopolis. The blood came forth from her, and it transformed into turquoise. She is in the form of a female statue, with the face of a lion. She is kneeling, with her thighs beneath her. Her appearance on the eastern mountain of Heliopolis is the rising Sirius, Sobdet as the Egyptians called the star, which after about 70 days of absence from the sky returns heralding the flooding of the Nile. Some sources suggest that the goddess's escape was caused by the incredible harm she had suffered. The true archetype of the wandering goddess, the daughter of the sun Tefnut, according to the Hermopolitan version of the myth, was violated by her own son, Geb. Also identified with Bastet, Horit was violated by her own father, Osiris, and according to other sources, by her uncle, Seth. In the Delta Manual we read, "Then Seth greatly harmed this goddess in the lower Emet. He copulated with her by force." Since Bastet is called Horit in the same text during her escape, it's easy to guess that she was also harmed. The wrong goddess purifies herself in the river. Then she's supposed to have her first menstruation, thus dramatically ceasing to be a child and, in the eyes of the ancients, achieving sexual maturity. Unimaginably wronged by someone close, the young goddess reacts with uncontrolled anger in the form of a lioness or a Nubian cat, as the ancients probably called black panthers, spreading terror among all living things. The mighty weapon of Atum-Ra, the solar eye which the goddess represented, was beyond the control of the creator. It became the powerful one, that is Sekhmet, titled More Mighty Than the Gods. A solution by force was therefore out of the question. The king of the gods sent his intelligence to make her come back. The wise god taught in the form of a small, inconspicuous baboon. The goddess travels abroad, where she vents her anger on the foreign, non-Egyptian people, who, according to the ancient Egyptians, are servants of Isfet, which means servants of chaos. Finding the goddess wasn't difficult. Most sources point to Egypt's southern neighbor, Nubia, but persuading her to return required much effort. Thoth occupies the goddess with numerous parables, demonstrating the need to restore order and balance to the world, skillfully using flattery, gradually calming the agitated goddess. These attempts are described in a Demotic papyrus, the so-called Leiden 384 from Roman times. This is how a clever baboon made the goddess miss home. Quote, "My heart longs for Egypt, my country. Its fragrance comes to me. Its winds entice me. The hungry leave their city, but the satiated remain there. Will you go with me to Egypt? I will convince you of what I say. I will satisfy you with what you desire. I will make you fresh like a plant that grows in the water. I will revive your body. I will strengthen your bones. I will make you praise the happiness of this mountain that made me meet you." We read further. "The little monkey opened his mouth and spoke, saying, 'Oh, may you live. Oh, may you be healthy. Oh, you, the one of whom Ra boasts. The lands know your fearsomeness, but it's your gentle from which you should take. Do not become angry. You should love mercy. Your power is great. Do not abandon your reputation. I know your mighty greatness. You are the greatest of the great. Do not reject your kind. Blessed is he who has spoken to you. He who alters your command will be seized by the plague, and he who uses violence against you will immediately be rejected." Thoth then tells the goddess allegorical stories in which he condemns perjury, wickedness, and justifies punishment for the harm done. Among them we learn the story entitled The Cat and the Vulture. Quote, "There was once a female vulture who had a nest on top of a desert tree, not far from a cat who had given birth at the foot of a hill. However, the vulture was afraid to go looking for food for her chicks, for fear that the cat would take the opportunity to destroy her young ones. Similarly, the cat was afraid to look for food for her kittens, for fear that the vulture would eat them. The vulture said, 'Can we not coexist in peace if we take an oath before Ra, the great god, in these terms? When one of us goes to get her little one's meal, the other must not harm them.' They exchanged oaths before Ra to comply with these terms. As it turns out, the pact didn't last very long. Knowing that vengeance of Ra had left the country and gone to Syria, the vulture decided to betray the cat. One day, the cat went to get some food for her young ones, and the vulture destroyed them. When the cat returned, she could no longer find her kittens. She then looked up at the sky and begged Ra, 'Recognize my rights towards this vulture, who has exterminated my children after betraying the oaths we swore together.' Her request was heard by Ra. A divine power was sent to bring vengeance to strike the vulture who had exterminated the cat's offspring. He found vengeance under the tree where the vulture had her perch. Now the vulture had seen a Syrian who was roasting a desert donkey. She took a piece of food when he wasn't looking. She carried the piece of meat in her beak and brought it to her nest, but she didn't notice that glowing embers were still attached to it. The embers burned the vulture's nest and her chicks fell to the ground beneath the tree. The cat came up and spoke to the vulture. 'By the life of Ra, it was you who broke your oath and who destroyed my children. Now vengeance has struck your little ones who have been consumed by fire.' The little monkey said, 'Ra makes vengeance strike.'" Thoth continued to manipulate the goddess with subsequent parables and laudations in her honor, never leaving her side, saying, "My lady, Egypt lies sorrowful at your feet. There is no day of celebration in your temples. The women and men have a sad face. The beautiful women walk along the street without a smile. But when you turn your face towards them, you are like the Nile that floods the dry fields. Their drums are silent. Their harps are covered with dust. Your dancers beat on the tambourine, but there is no sound in their hands. Your dancers call for you. Your tambourine players have not come to the arcades of the street. Your singers are in mourning. Your flute players have stopped in fear at the entrance of the street. Your florists are all in despair. They ask about your ways. Their eyes turn away from you. They call for you like the rain, like the astronomers await Sirius. The young goddess seemed to gradually succumb to her little companion's ministrations. Quote, "You have my heart heavy, although it had become calm. My heart was content after I succeeded in forgetting Egypt. Behold, by your love for your country, you have made me long again for my Egypt, which was like the scent of weed to my heart." There were moments, however, when the daughter of Ra was clearly tired of Thoth's intrusiveness, so she tried to scare him by transforming into the terrifying Sekhmet. We read, "She transformed into a furious lioness, who had divine power in her hide and likewise in her breath. She shook her hair mane forwards, and her fur smoked with fire. Her back turned to the color of blood. Her face shone like the disk of the sun, her eyes glowed like flames, her gaze burned like fire, throwing out flames like the midday sun, and all around her was incandescent. Everyone around her became afraid of her display of power. The desert rose to dust when she flicked her tail. The sand rose up when she bared her teeth. The desert threw out flames when she sharpened her claws. The thorn bushes dried up when her nostrils blew smoke and many blowflies came out. She let out a mighty roar with the full force of her voice. The desert opened its mouth, the stone spoke to the sand, and the hill trembled for 2 hours. The brave Thoth, who had kept his cool until then, panicked. Quote, "His body trembled like that of someone in the grip of an illness. He became like a frog, and he hopped like a grasshopper." Full of humility, the little baboon said, "I know that you are called Cat, the one who isn't subject to the power of the Avenger. I also know that you are the instrument of death, and that you never die. You are the instrument of the Avenger and Justice, the daughter of Ra. You are called Whispering Cat, because you whisper in the ears of the inhabitants of the earth." These beautiful words made her turn her face towards Egypt, and the dog monkey rushed to the goddess to entertain her while her heart was truly glad. He said to her, "My lady, this is the way to Egypt. It is not the desert path on which you have walked for so long. I will make you cover the distance in a few days." She laughed and said, "Why didn't you tell me this before?" The goddess's change of heart resulted in the immediate restoration of the natural order of the world. Quote, "Then the north wind came from heaven, bringing with it the scent of Punt, the Nile rose, and it became a light in the morning when Ra appeared as a great flaming disk of the sun. His looks were full of joy and his rays were full of life. There were no clouds in the path of Sirius, whose rays shone on Egypt." However, the forces of chaos didn't remain passive. According to many sources, when they arrived together in Egypt, an unpleasant surprise awaited them. While traveling north, the goddess, then in the form of a gazelle, was unexpectedly attacked during a night stop by a scorpion, acting on the orders of the sun's greatest enemy, Apep, who wanted to prevent Maat from returning to Egypt. The goddess owed her salvation solely to the vigilance of Thoth, who woke her up, and together they ran on to the ferry, where she could safely continue her journey down the river. Then the daughter of Ra returned to her true form, a beautiful young goddess, and the whole land celebrated her return. The long-awaited meeting of Ra, who longed for his daughter, took place in Memphis. Finally, as Bastet, the goddess reached her beloved city in the Nile Delta, Bubastis, where a joyful festival was celebrated in memory of this event. We will return to the festival itself later. The cult of the once powerful Bastet during the Middle and New Kingdom weakened significantly, becoming almost a local cult, limited to the Nile Delta. Although in Egypt of the New Kingdom, that is from the 16th century BC, was a renaissance of the solar cult, at its center was a new deity, Amun-Ra, with his powerful Theban sanctuary in Karnak. After the death of the last of the Ramesses, Ramses XI, in the 11th century BC, the priests of Amun took power over Thebes, controlling only the southern part of Upper Egypt. The rest of the country was plunged into political chaos. The delta became the prey of Libyan tribes. the Libyan great chief Shoshank, who occupied Bubastis, established his own 22nd dynasty in the 10th century BC, called the Bubastite dynasty. The third intermediate period saw the collapse of the cult of Amun-Ra, which would remain a local cult, and at the same time a great flourishing of local folk cults and zulatry. Of course, it was also the great return of Bastet, who became the patroness of the 22nd dynasty, and even one of its rulers called himself Pami, which means he who belongs to the cat. At that time we see the transformation of the goddess into a cat, the mild and gracious goddess, the counterpart of the cruel lioness. We don't know why Bastet began to be worshipped as a cat, but in this form, she certainly became closer to her followers, less exclusive than the dangerous lioness associated with royalty. In the language of the ancient Egyptians, the cat was called by the onomatopoeic word mew or mead in its feminine form. In Egypt, there were two species of smaller cats, the jungle cat and the African wildcat. It's commonly believed that the Egyptians were the first to domesticate cats, but this isn't true. The oldest known burial of a human with a cat, probably a tamed one, was found in Cyprus and is dated to about 9,500 years ago. New genetic studies point to Mesopotamia as the first place where cats were domesticated. The oldest evidence of potential domestication of cats in Egypt is a joint burial with humans from 6,000 years ago, discovered near Asyut. In pharaonic Egypt, cats were domesticated quite late. They were shown sporadically on the reliefs of Old Kingdom mastabas as part of the natural fauna. In the Middle Kingdom, from about 2000 BC, images of cats become more common and were shown in contexts suggesting their domestication. In the Egyptian agricultural society, the primary function of the domesticated cat was, of course, to control pests. In time, the animal became a popular companion of the household. In the funerary art of the Middle and New Kingdom, it was shown among family members or everyday objects, sitting under the chair of the tomb owner or on his lap. If the deceased wasn't a cat person, he was portrayed with a dog or a monkey. Cats, which moved very well in difficult terrain, accompanied hunters tracking birds and guarded homes against the real nightmare of the ancients, snakes and scorpions. The Egyptians certainly noticed how eager cats were to rest in doorways or on windowsills, and perhaps interpreted this as guarding the entrances to their homes, similarly to the way sphinxes guard the entrances to the temples. They were considered defenders of the family, home, and especially newborns. Bastet, once the lion-headed guardian of the royal family, the heavenly mother of the pharaoh, was now associated with an animal that, in the minds of the Egyptians, actually played the same role, but now she became the mother goddess of all Egyptians. This is how the father of history, Herodotus, described Egyptian customs in the 5th century BC. Quote, "When a fire breaks out, very strange things happen among the cats. The Egyptians stand around in a broken line, thinking more of the cats than of quenching the burning. But the cats slip through or leap over the men and spring into the fire. When this happens, there is great mourning in Egypt. The occupants of a house where a cat has died a natural death shave their eyebrows." Cats weren't considered living incarnations of the goddess, as in the case of the sacred bulls, Apis of Memphis or Nevis of Heliopolis. However, they were considered the souls of the gods. Contact with them was a religious experience, enabling a close relationship with the divine, without priests, without intermediaries. The Cult of Bastet was becoming a domestic and folk cult, thanks to which its popularity was constantly growing. In the first millennium BC, thousands of artifacts related to the Cult of Bastet were produced, the famous cat figurines, one of the symbols of ancient Egypt. They served the faithful both in public ceremonies as votive offerings given to temples and private celebrations. These objects had preventive value, protecting against evil. In the late and Ptolemaic periods, votive statuettes of cats made of bronze, decorated with jewelry and magical symbols, were particularly popular. They often served as containers for relics, for example, a fragment of a mummified cat. In Roman times, these figurines decorated home altars. Equally popular were statuettes and amulets in the form of a cat-headed woman, sometimes shown in the company of kittens, holding a papyrus scepter, characteristic of Bastet, a sign of emerging life, a sistrum, or a basket, which resembled an Egyptian housewife. Female cats, as we know, can give birth to even a dozen or so kittens a year, so they were a true symbol of fertility and motherhood. It was believed that female cats present in the house prevented miscarriages. Bastet assisted in childbirth and guarded newborns, although, according to most traditions, she didn't have children herself, hence the Greeks identified her with Artemis. Figurines of naked women and children, objects associated with fertility and raising offspring, were a permanent element of her cult. The immense popularity of Bastet in the late period and the special devotion given to her animal image would take a toll on the Egyptians during the Persian invasion in 525 BC. The ruler of the Achaemenid Empire, Cambyses II, defeated the young pharaoh Psamtik III of the 26th dynasty at the Battle of Pelusium, when he ordered his soldiers to display images of Bastet on their shields while releasing cats and other sacred for the enemy animals in front of Persian army. Of course, the Egyptians would never lay their hand on the sacred images, and instead retreated in disarray, which sealed their fate. This is how the Persian victory is described by the Macedonian historian from the 2nd century AD, Polynius. When Cambyses attacked Pelusium, which guarded the entrance into Egypt, the Egyptians defended it with great resolution. They advanced formidable engines against the besiegers and hurled missiles, stones, and fire at them from their catapults. To counter this destructive barrage, Cambyses ranged before his front line dogs, sheep, cats, ibises, and whatever other animals the Egyptians hold sacred. The Egyptians immediately stopped their operations out of fear of hurting the animals, which they hold in great veneration. Cambyses captured Pelusium and thereby opened up for himself the route into Egypt. Shortly after the fall of Memphis, the Persians captured Psamtik, ending the rule of the Sayyid dynasty, and Egypt became a Persian satrapy for the first time. According to Herodotus, in Egypt, taking a cat's life was punishable by death, and doing it unintentionally was punishable by a fine. Owners of deceased cats from all over the country made pilgrimages to Bubastis to bury their remains. It's not known how many cat mummies have been found in Egypt to this day. According to some, the ancients mummified millions of these animals. The oldest known mummy was found in the tomb of the prematurely deceased eldest son of Amenhotep III, crown prince and high priest of Ptah in Memphis, Thutmose, from the mid-14th century BC. His pet was buried like a member of the royal family, in a beautifully decorated limestone sarcophagus with an inscription informing about the cat's name, Ta Miu, which literally means she-cat. A cat mummy from this time seems to be an extravagance of the prince, even though the first cemeteries of these animals appeared already in the New Kingdom. The peak of popularity of these practices was, however, the late and Greco-Roman period. Large cemeteries with thousands of cat mummies were found in Bubastis, Beni Hassan, and Saqqara. Most of them belong to the so-called votive mummies, made on a large scale by temple workshops. Pilgrims visiting sanctuaries paid for mummification, hoping for the intercession of the animal before the gods, to receive grace or as a form of thanksgiving. Temple embalmers dried the remains with natron, a locally sourced mixture of sodium and salt, and then anointed them with oil and resin. The bodies were filled with sand or cloth and then wrapped in bandages. Sometimes a death mask was added, or the cat's face was painted to give a realistic appearance. Some mummies were stylized as anthropomorphic, with human arms and feet molded onto them. In general, however, cat mummies took the form of a tight, cylindrical bundle. The great popularity, especially in Ptolemaic times, of pilgrims buying ready-made votive mummies made this business extremely profitable. To meet the demand, large temple cat farms were established, intended solely for slaughter. As you can see, the law wasn't very binding on the priests. Studies of the mummies indicate that most of them were annihilated at a young age by breaking their necks or skulls. Cheaper methods were also used in the production of mummies. As many as 1/3 of all mummified cats found in Saqqara were incomplete or contained only a fragment of the animal's body. In false mummies we find twisted pieces of material, ropes or hay, sometimes cunningly weighed down with stones. We don't know whether this is a product of the cynicism of priests dishonest towards pilgrims, or a solution caused by the lack of raw material, that is, dead animals, necessary for making mummies. We don't know how the ancient Egyptians pronounced Bastet's name. In the hieroglyphic record, we find the symbol of an ointment jar. The word Bastet could therefore mean she of the ointment jar. In Greco-Roman times, the Egyptians might have pronounced her name as Ubaste, as the Copts called her Aubaste. Some see in her name she of the ointment jar a connection with perfumes, others with ceremonial ointments with special properties. One of the elements of Bastet's cult were small, colorful vials with unknown contents. Along with figurines and small tablets, they were given as votive offerings during festivals. May you be as happy as the Lady of Bubastis. These were the wishes that the Egyptians made to each other. Their cat patroness personified joy, music, dance, and love, especially the physical kind. Her priests provided various services related to sex and love, foretold whether marriage plans would succeed, and delivered love spells. Young Egyptian women entrusted their affairs of the heart not only to Hathor, but also to the sensual Bastet. She symbolized female sexuality, patronized orgiastic entertainment and was the patroness of sex workers, representatives of the oldest profession in the world. It's no wonder then that religious celebrations in honor of Bastet were orgiastic in nature. Regardless of whether they were private or collective, sex and alcohol had cultic significance. The Love and Lust festival associated with the mythological return of the daughter of the sun took place both at the Hathor sanctuary in Dendera and in Bubastis, where Egyptians from all over the country gathered to celebrate the new year, the heliacal rising of Sirius, the coming flood of the Nile, and the end of the harvest. During this summer, several-day festival, people thanked the goddess for the favors received in the past year and asked for more. As we know, each local center had its own festivals and rituals, but not all were equally popular. Celebrations in honor of local deities were usually gathered only by the local community, but some festivals took on a national character and mass participation in them took place. This applies above all to the Osirian mysteries in Abydos and Busiris, the Opet festival in Thebes, or the popular from the late period, the Festival of Lamps at Sais in honor of Neith, and of course the enthronement of the bull Apis in Memphis. Countless crowds from all over the country also flocked to Bubastis, Herodotus writes. The Egyptians do not hold a single solemn assembly, but several in the course of the year. Of these, the chief, which is better attended than any other, is held at the city of Bubastis, in honor of Diana. The next in importance is that which takes place at Busiris, a city situated in the very middle of the delta. It is in honor of Isis, who is called in the Greek tongue Demeter. There is a third great festival in Sais to Minerva, a fourth in Heliopolis to the sun, a fifth in Buto to Latona, and a sixth in Papremis to Mars. The following are the proceedings on occasion of the assembly at Bubastis. Men and women come sailing all together, vast numbers in each boat, many of the women with castanets, which they strike, while some of the men pipe during the whole time of the voyage. The remainder of the voyagers, male and female, sing and make a clapping with their hands. When they arrive opposite any of the towns upon the banks of the stream, they approach the shore, and while some of the women continue to play and sing, others call aloud to the females of the place and load them with abuse, while a certain number dance and some, standing up, uncover themselves. After proceeding in this way all along the river course, they reach Bubastis, where they celebrate the feast with abundant sacrifices. More grape wine is consumed at this festival than in all the rest of the year besides. The number of those who attend, counting only the men and women and omitting the children, amounts, according to the native reports, to 700,000. The provocative behavior of female pilgrims described by Herodotus was related to ritual obscenity. The women lifting their skirts in Bubastis can be compared to the exposure of breasts during the Hathor festival in Dendera. What was considered indecent during the rest of the year, during the festival, could be expected behavior by the goddess and her priests, who, according to Roman sources, incited the crowd to a boisterous celebration. We read, "A priest incites a crowd of the goddess's worshippers at her feast to drink to the point of intoxication. As they listen to him, the members of the crowd grow more excited until they scream with joy. Finally, in a state of rapture, they proclaim that Bastet has arrived among them. Another papyrus from the early 2nd century lists the cheers of joy of festival participants. Let's drink, let's eat, let's have fun. Let Bastet come to our celebration. Let's get drunk on the occasion of her festival of drunkenness. Of course, such accounts allowed Roman authors to perpetuate the stereotype of the Egyptian as a promiscuous, drunken, and dancing barbarian. Of course, apart from having a good time, the aim of most annual festivals was to bring the sacred statue of the goddess before the people. The crowds participating in the procession could thus have direct contact with the deity and receive a special blessing. Other gods also took part in the procession, both cult statues of local deities brought here from small religious centers, as well as images of important gods, ceremoniously brought by priests on special barks, for whom separate rituals were performed near the Temple of Bastet. Located on an island, surrounded by the waters of the Nile, the Temple of Bastet was built in the Old Kingdom. Expanded in subsequent periods, it flourished during the Third Intermediate Period, under the previously mentioned Libyan pharaohs of the 22nd dynasty. Its last reconstruction was carried out by Nectanebo II of the 30th dynasty, the last native pharaoh of Egypt from the 4th century BC. The temple was destroyed in the 4th century AD, and now all that remains of it are rubbles. Of course, Bubastis is the Greek name of the city. The Egyptians called it Per-Bast, which means House of Bast. It was the capital of the 18th nome of Lower Egypt, an important trade center located on the Bubastian branch of the Nile, a strategic point in the eastern delta, from which the routes leading to Syria started. Interestingly, this city is mentioned in the Bible. In chapter 30 of Ezekiel we read, "I will set fire to Egypt, Pelusium will writhe in agony, Thebes will be taken by storm, Memphis will be in constant distress. The young men of Heliopolis and Bubastis will fall by the sword, and the cities themselves will go into captivity." The second important center of the Cult of Bastet was Alexandria. In the 3rd century BC, on the orders of Queen Berenike II, the Bubastion was built. Identified with Isis, Bastet achieved some success outside Egypt. Ultimately, however, she shared the fate of Isis, and her cult disappeared completely in the 6th century. However, I have the impression that among Christians and Muslims, among whom I live here in Egypt, a special respect for cats continues. I hope you learned something new about the beliefs of ancient Egyptians. Thank you for listening. Please let me know in the comments what you'd like to hear next time. I would also like to thank all my patrons. I truly appreciate your contribution. If you don't support me yet, but would like to, I placed my Patreon link below in the description. Don't forget to like my video and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye, and see you on the next one.